I would like to hear more about the relations of your work to security, school security. I'm a bit worried because I look after a big school,
Right.
and that's our school also has a tourism attraction.
Right.
We have a cave pool which is very popular,
Mm-hmm.
and most of the tour, every day it's flooded by tourists.
Right.
But also our children are running around the place, and we don't trust every one of them. How would you help us with that? Thanks.
The sex tourism is a thing. It comes back to the point I made around not being the weakest link when it comes to legislation. I referred to it, but we know these communities are online, these predators are online, they're talking amongst themselves and they're saying, actually, if you go to England, you can do X, Y, Z and you won't get caught because there's a loophole here. And one of the areas that we're particularly focusing on plugging that gap for the Pacific. We know there's some holes in the legislation at the moment which allow criminals to operate in a way that they don't in other areas. And so as a result of that, there is some sex tourism that I think we can address and that we can stop relatively easily. Stopping predators coming here, child trafficking, stopping sort of grooming, even if it's online grooming through sort of international online grooming, but even sort of domestic online grooming as well. There will be some aspects of tourism that are enhanced through drugs, absolutely. There was one example that Collie gave me around drugs, that whether it was tourist ships or whether it was cargo ships, that drugs are being attached to the hull of these ships that are going into the Pacific visiting. So if you imagine your cruise liners, your catamarans, your yachts again, and then once they're near the port, someone goes along and hooks them off. And so that is obviously sort of facilitated through an increase of tourism and trade through the area as well. Your second point, going on to that about security, completely agree. And actually another example that I didn't touch on in the presentation was there's been examples of school kids being caught using heroin needles and sharing them in secondary school, which is awful, as I'm sure we all agree. Particularly, I would say, at a time when we've got a risk of HIV, and that we know that's exacerbated through needle sharing. And so, when it comes to security and when it comes to helping those that are vulnerable, particularly in your example around school children, for me, it's that prevention aspect of the work that we're doing, going into schools, helping raise that awareness, but not even just going into schools, because I personally have it's all well and good going in and doing a presentation to people, or maybe doing some hotel training, but what happens when you leave? And I want to make sure there's something lasting. So I'm looking at developing some materials, some guidance that we can give to these institutions, schools as well, that can be distributed regularly to the students and that awareness be raised. Because it's those that are vulnerable in those situations that I think we need to reach.